Hello, dear friends. I am Dr. Nikolai Stepanovich Orlov, a surgeon with great experience, a representative of the old school who has adhered to a simple rule throughout his life. Food should aid recovery. Let me share a fact that often surprises even doctors. Properly prepared sauerkraut begins to act as a remedy when consumed daily in amounts of 10 to 15 grams, just 1 tablespoon. The effect is truly palpable. However, there is an important note. Its benefits only manifest when the fermentation technologies are followed. Small mistakes in the process can significantly reduce healing properties and even cause negative reactions in sensitive individuals, such as increased pressure, headaches, or exacerbation of allergies. Today we will discuss in detail how to properly ferment cabbage to become a reliable aid for the heart, blood vessels, intestines, and immune system. If you, like me, believe that health starts in the kitchen, support us. Be healthy, subscribe and like, and leave short phrases in the comments to help understand the direction to move forward. For example, I maintain the kitchen like a pharmacy, or I want a myth busting about salt. Your comments are the fuel on which every new video is built. And be sure to watch the episode until the end. I will tell you how to reduce the byproducts of long fermentation with one simple trick and preserve maximum benefit. This moment is often overlooked even by experienced housewives. First, let's understand why sauerkraut can act as a medicine. It's not just about the vitamins and minerals, which are not so abundant, especially after long storage. The main active substances are polyphenols, natural antioxidants that play an important role in maintaining the health of blood vessels and the brain, have anti-inflammatory properties, and help control body weight. Next, these sulfur compounds from the group of isothiocyanates are activated during fermentation and contribute to the functioning of the intestines, immune system, and liver. Finally, these live lactic acid bacteria inhabit our intestines and strengthen its protective functions. All this becomes possible thanks to the right starter culture. If you make a mistake with salt, temperature, or time, the amount of polyphenols and isothiocyanates will decrease. Beneficial bacteria will be in insufficient quantities and not the right kinds. Meanwhile, the undesirable substances will increase. Cabbage comes in different varieties. For instance, red cabbage is significantly richer in polyphenols, including anthocyanins, these blue-purple pigments, as well as vitamin C and potassium. White cabbage, on the other hand, excels in zinc and magnesium content, is more familiar in taste, and is cheaper. My cautious medical approach for the elderly is simple. Focus on your feelings and health condition. If your pancreas is fine and you consume cabbage in moderation, add 20 to 50% red cabbage to the white cabbage. This will give you a more powerful antioxidant effect and a better potassium ratio without overwhelming the digestion. If your pancreas reacts to new foods, start with classic white cabbage, sliced into thin strips, and gradually introduce red cabbage in small amounts. We will discuss how fermentation technology can reduce the burden on the digestive system. But now let's talk about salt. In our region, there are often debates about whether it's better to do without salt or to add more for flavor. However, the truth, as always, lies in the middle, and it is based on scientific data. Salt is necessary not only for enhancing flavor. It regulates the fermentation process, suppressing undesirable microbes and promoting the growth of beneficial bacteria. But it is important that salt is used in reasonable amounts. Typically, elderly people are safer working with a low concentration, about 0.5% of the weight of cabbage. For example, for 1 kilogram of chopped cabbage, this is about 1 teaspoon without a heap. Such a level promotes an increase in the share of proper fermentation products. What salt is better to choose? If possible, choose mineral salt with potassium chloride, which should make up about 30% of the mixture. Potassium helps balance sodium and is beneficial for blood vessels. If such salt is unavailable, regular table salt without iodine will suffice. Sea salt does not provide any particular advantages. We will return to the calculations of salt, the tricks of its dissolution, and how to smoothly transition from the usual large doses to more reasonable ones. Fermentation is not only about ingredients, but also about the process. Beneficial bacteria activate during the warm starting phase and then prefer coolness. A convenient scheme for home preparation looks like this. Keep the jar at room temperature of about 18 degrees for the first 3 days. During this period, the aroma develops and an active process begins. Then move the jar to a cooler place where the temperature will be between 12 and 15 degrees, and let it work quietly for about 2 weeks. The task is simple. to provide time for beneficial flora to outcompete pathogenic microorganisms, develop lactic acid, and turn raw cabbage into a safe and stable product. It is important that the cabbage is completely covered in brine. The mass should be tightly tamped, gas released, pierced with a skewer, and pressed down with a weight. These are not just culinary details, but important points for the safety and benefit of the final product. There are also two more nuances that are usually remembered too late. The first is the storage time after fermentation is complete. I understand the nostalgia for barrels of cabbage throughout the winter, but modern science advises caution. The longer the prepared cabbage is stored in the refrigerator, the less vitamin C and other valuable compounds it contains, for which we prepared it. During prolonged storage, biogenic amines such as tyramine and histamine accumulate, which some people may be particularly sensitive to. Such individuals may experience headaches, spikes in blood pressure, and increased allergic itching. For most healthy people, moderate amounts pose no danger, but the elderly and sensitive should focus on freshness. It is recommended to consume a batch within 1 to 2 months. The second point is combinations. We will talk about them later, but I will say in advance that there are simple additives that can be used during storage to significantly reduce the accumulation of unwanted substances. Dear friends, to be on the same wavelength, I will briefly outline our goal to ensure that the microflora in your bank develops faster and more stably, so that polyphenols do not degrade but transform into more active forms. We need the cabbage to be free of unwanted guests and the finished product to be easily digestible for the elderly, providing relief in the stomach rather than heaviness. To do this, you need to choose the right cabbage, use a moderate amount of salt, set the appropriate temperature, and add a couple of clever enhancers that you may not yet know about. If you want more useful health recipes to appear, support us with a subscription and comment that you are interested in this topic. Your feedback helps us understand what to elaborate on and which myths to debunk first. And now for the most exciting part. In the next section, we will look in detail at how to choose raw materials. We will learn to properly dose and dissolve salt, avoiding negative effects on blood pressure and the pancreas. I will show how a simple addition during cooking can reduce the risk of unpleasant substances during storage. These simple solutions make cabbage not just a food product, but a true support for your health. The first and most common mistake is to treat cabbage like any other vegetable. In reality, the differences between varieties are quite significant. White cabbage is more familiar, has a mild taste, releases juice well, and is easy to ferment. However, in terms of benefits for blood vessels, metabolism, and anti-inflammatory effects, red cabbage significantly surpasses it. The key lies in anthocyanins, special pigments that give the leaves a purple-red hue. They protect vessels, the brain, and the retina from damage, improve microcirculation, and help reduce inflammatory processes. Studies show that red cabbage contains 8 times more anthocyanins than white cabbage, making its antioxidant activity 8 times higher. In addition, it contains 1.5 times more vitamin C and 1/3 more iron and calcium, making it an ideal product for elderly people. However, as a doctor, I must warn, not everything beneficial is suitable for everyone. Red cabbage can stimulate the production of digestive enzymes, and it may be heavy for people with a weakened pancreas. Therefore, my advice is, if your pancreas is sensitive, don't just aim for color. It's better to mix half white cabbage and half red cabbage. This option will be milder in taste and bring many benefits. It is both economical and physiological. White cabbage will provide you with magnesium and zinc, while red cabbage will offer antioxidants and potassium. Together, they will balance each other perfectly. By the way, potassium is especially important as it helps eliminate excess fluid and reduces the influence of sodium on blood pressure. Therefore, for those with high blood pressure, red cabbage in a mixture will be an excellent assistant. If you have issues with gas or a sensitive gut, start with small portions, literally a couple of spoonfuls. How to choose cabbage at the market? The best are firm, heavy heads with tight leaves, without cracks or damage. If the cabbage is loose, it may indicate the beginning of the natural aging process, which in turn leads to a decrease in its beneficial properties. Ideally, it is better to choose late varieties. They are denser and can be stored longer. Another important point, if the cabbage has been stored for at least a week in a cool place after harvesting, it will ferment more evenly and emit a less sharp smell. In this case, the enzymes are distributed evenly. Now let's move on to the main question. How much salt is needed, and what kind exactly? This is critically important. Salt not only adds flavor, it also regulates the fermentation process. If there is too much salt, the bacteria die and stop working. In case of insufficient salt, undesirable microorganisms may start to multiply, which can spoil the cabbage. The optimal concentration for health is about 0.5% of the mass. This is about 5 grams of salt per kilogram of cabbage. Why exactly this amount? Research shows that at this concentration in cabbage, the maximum beneficial substances are formed, especially from thiocyanates and ascorbate, which is a precursor to vitamin C. Increasing the salt dose to 1.5% slows down the process, and some vitamins simply do not have time to form. Without salt in the fermentation, the risks increase. Undesirable bacteria begin to dominate, and acidity decreases. Both excess and deficiency of salt are equally harmful. Now about the type of salt. There are many kinds that are advertised as miraculous, but the truth is simple. The most beneficial option for pickling is mineral salt with added potassium. It contains about 30% potassium and calcium. Potassium helps balance excess sodium and supports heart health. There are also salts with magnesium. This is an even more preferable option, especially if you have vascular problems or night cramps. However, fashionable Himalayan and black salts do not have any special advantages. Sea salt is no better than regular salt. It just costs more. It is important to avoid iodized salt, as iodine is unstable and can interfere with the proper fermentation process, especially in the early days. Use plain salt without additives and do not oversalt. The cabbage should release juice naturally, without burning the tongue. I will give an example from practice. One of my patients, Galina Mikhailovna, who at 74 had been fermenting cabbage by eye her whole life, had high blood pressure but did not associate it with her diet. After we recalculated her recipe, it turned out she was adding too much salt. Another important point that is rarely mentioned. The salt must completely dissolve in the cabbage juice to avoid areas of high concentration where beneficial bacteria simply cannot survive. Therefore, before packing, I recommend thoroughly mixing the shredded cabbage with salt by hand until juice appears, and only then packing it down. This is not a culinary whim. It is an important stage of the proper technique. How to know if there is enough salt? The cabbage should be juicy but not floating in water. The brine will appear on its own in a few hours, sometimes the next day. If the juice is still insufficient, a little salted water can be added, but with a concentration no more than 0.5%. And, of course, fermentation should be done in clean containers. Glass jars or ceramic pots are ideal, but aluminum and galvanized materials should be avoided as acid can react with the metal. A wooden barrel is a traditional option, but it is now hard to find a quality one that is not treated, so using glass is easier. Friends, I want you to understand, we are not just pickling cabbage, but managing the fermentation process. We create conditions in which beneficial bacteria do significant work for us. They process sugars and produce lactic acid, which protects both the product and ourselves. Our task is to not interfere and not hasten what should happen naturally. If you've reached this point, it means you're really interested in understanding not just the recipes, but the essence of the process. Write about it in the comments. You can simply write, "Doing it for health," and I will understand that this topic is important to you. Now that everything is clear with the salt and the choice of cabbage, it's time to move on to the main thing, the live process of fermentation. This is where the reason for all this begins. Beneficial bacteria, enzymes, and substances that transform simple vegetables into a natural means of maintaining health. I often tell my patients, cabbage is like a living organism. If you create the right conditions for it, it will do everything for you. But if you make a mistake, instead of a healing product, you will end up with just a sour side dish. Let's start with the preparation. Once you have chopped the cabbage, mixed it with salt, and waited for the juice to appear, it's time to carefully pack the mixture into a clean glass or ceramic container. Each layer is gently tamped down to expel air. It is the lack of oxygen that creates conditions for the desired microflora to develop. Beneficial lactic acid bacteria and aerobes prefer tranquility and cannot tolerate excess air. Therefore, the cabbage must be completely covered with brine. If there is not enough juice, add a little salted water with a concentration of 0.5% salt. On top, place a small weight, like a plate with a can of water, to keep the leaves submerged. Now the most important parameter is temperature. Many make mistakes here. If the temperature is too high, beneficial bacteria will die, and undesirable ones will take their place. If it is too cold, fermentation will stop, and the cabbage will simply sour without benefit. The optimal temperature to start the process is around 18 degrees. 3 days in such conditions will activate the growth of those very lactobacilli responsible for the proper acidity and light aroma. At this stage, The cabbage begins to hiss, and gas bubbles appear. This is normal. After 3 days, the second phase, maturation, begins. Transfer the container to a cool place where the temperature stays between 12 and 15 degrees. If you don't have a cellar, the bottom shelf of the refrigerator will do. The cabbage should stay here for about 2 weeks. During this time, the beneficial flora will reach its peak. Lactic acid will displace harmful microbes, and the taste will become harmonious. After 7 days, the product is already safe. But for people with thyroid diseases, it is better to wait from 12 to 14 days. During this time, substances that hinder the thyroid gland's function are destroyed, making the cabbage completely safe. Remember to occasionally monitor the process. If foam appears on the surface, it's normal. Just scoop it off with a spoon. Every day, carefully pierce the cabbage with a wooden knife or skewer to the bottom of the jar to release the gas. This simple step will help prevent bitterness and excess acidity. Now let's talk about interesting additions for the fermentation. Scientists have long established that a small amount of certain natural components helps improve microflora and reduces the formation of undesirable substances like tyramine and histamine, which can cause discomfort in sensitive individuals, especially during prolonged storage. One of these assistants is cumin. Just 10 grams of seeds for a couple of kilograms of cabbage significantly reduces the formation of excess amines and improves taste. Moreover, cumin aids digestion and alleviates bloating, which is especially important for elderly people. If you are not a fan of cumin, you can use a bit of dill. It acts similarly but has a milder aroma. The second option is red onion. Add about 300 to 350 grams of finely chopped onion to 2 to 3 kilograms of cabbage. Onions not only suppress the growth of unwanted microbes but also reduce the levels of histamine and tyramine by almost half. Additionally, they give the snack a richer flavor and pleasant aroma. And finally, the third method, which few know about but I often recommend to my patients, is pharmacy probiotics. Yes, ordinary capsules with lactobacilli. They can be added right at the time of preparation. 1 capsule for every 2 to 4 kilograms of cabbage.